Welcome to Lab 1, Charged Tapes. We'll be going through the introduction, main physics principles, the actual experiment, code, and discussion. The purpose of this lab was to observe interactions between charged objects, to quantify the excess charge on a U-tape, and to model an interaction on VPython. The U-tapes were treated as point particles, and Newton's second law, gravitational force, as well as electric force were considered in this lab. The main results include that the U-tape was found to be positively charged. It had a charge of 2.37 times 10 to the negative 8 coulomb, and the U-tape was deficient 1.482 times 10 to the 11 electrons. Newton's second law equates the force acting on an object to its change in momentum over time, and the velocity update equation relates a change in velocity to the net force acting on an object. The tapes in this experiment were observed to be in static equilibrium. The gravitational force near the Earth's surface is 9.8 meters per second squared, and the electric force is determined by Coulomb's law. The two U-tapes were observed in an interaction between the two. The U-tape was also observed interacting with another object. And the final part of the experiment was to place a U-tape so that it hung between two objects of equal height, and to place that second U-tape beneath the suspended tape and to observe. Assumptions in this lab was that the U-tapes were treated as point charges, air resistance was neglected, and it was assumed that each U-tape had the same amount of charge. Observations include that the two U-tapes placed near each other repelled. The U-tape was attracted to a hand, and the U-tape was attracted to a negatively charged plastic pen. Due to this attraction to the pen, it was determined that the charge on the tape was positive. A suspended U-tape repelled a second U-tape placed directly beneath it, and the separation distance was found to be 0.0508 meters. The handheld tape, which was the surroundings as well as the Earth, and then the suspended U-tape, which was the system being studied. And the system was in static equilibrium, so the net force acting on the suspended U-tape had to be 0. The length of the tape was measured to be 0.2 meters with a width of 0.0203 meters, and the surface area of the tape was calculated to be 0.00406 meters squared with 4.06 times 10 to the 17 atoms. The vertical distance between the two tapes again was 0.0508 meters, and the weight of the tape was 0.00196 newtons. The force of gravity on the U-tape was found to be negative 0.00196 newtons in the negative y-hat direction. The charge was found to be 2.37 times 10 to the negative 8 coulomb, and the tape was found to be deficient 1.482 times 10 to the 17 electrons. The ratio of deficient electrons to atoms was 1 electron to 2.74 times 10 to the 6 atoms. The gravitational force, Coulomb's law, and Newton's second law, the magnitude of charge, as well as the ratio of deficient electrons to atoms. Over here we have the results of our coding. The U-tape is positively charged and will therefore have an electron deficiency. In order for the suspended tape to be motionless, it has to be experiencing a net force of 0. The electric force acting on the suspended tape by the held tape must be equal in magnitude and opposite in direction to the gravitational force experienced by the suspended tape. Possible sources of error include error from rounding in calculations and inaccurate measurements of the dimensions of the tape, as well as the separation of tapes. If electrons had positive charges and protons had negative charges, the interactions between charged particles would pretty much remain the same. Oppositely charged objects would still attract, while objects with the same charge would repel. The only real difference would be that the objects would have opposite charges, and their electric fields would also be swapped. So for this specific example, the two U-tapes would still repel if brought close to each other, and the pen and the U-tape would still be attracted to one another, but this time the pen would be positively charged while the U-tape would be negatively charged. And it is important to avoid contact with the charged tapes in order to avoid interfering with the value of the charge, because when the tapes come into contact with other objects, surface electrons move between objects, effectively changing the charge of the tape. So when in contact with a hand, the U-tape would gain electrons and experience a decrease in its positive charge.